Will Labour's Renters Reform Bill end an era of UK property investing? The second reading has just passed through Lords today. This is the 7th step in a 12-stage passage, tipping us just over the halfway point of this process. So I'm Harvey, the remote property investor, and I've got a very unique view on all of this because not only am I a tenant, I'm also a landlord, but I've just sold a letting agency that managed over 200 tenants. And as a deal sourcer for myself and my consulting clients, I've been involved with hundreds of property deals. So in this video, we're going to go over 12 of the major changes that are set to disrupt the property market. And I will also cover, is being a landlord still worth it in 2025? But before we get into all of that, let's look at how this began. So in April 2019, under then Theresa May Conservative government, they announced the new Renters' Right Bill, leading with the headline of abolishing the Section 21 no fault eviction. Fast forward to today, the can got massively kicked down the road, and obviously Conservative lost the last election to Labour. Keir Starmer steps in and says he's going to rehaul this old policy and push it over the line quicker than Conservatives could, and rebranded it into the Renters Reform Bill. And quite frankly, this has had landlords shaking in their boots ever since the thought of Labour taking over this. So let's go over these 11 changes. The main headline of this whole thing is all being around abolishing Section 21. So how will this affect the market? So in all honesty, if the government rehaul this, how they're saying they're going to rehaul this. So basically they're saying if tenants be antisocial behaviour more than a few times, you're going to be able to get your tenant property back in 2 weeks. If they deliver on the promise of what they're saying, I don't believe getting rid of this is going to be a bad thing. The challenge is, and the reason the can got kicked down the road for so long, is the court system will not be able to keep up with these changes just yet. Where Conservatives recognise that, but Labour seem to be ignoring that and trying to push this through quicker. But if they do what they say they're going to do, it's not a bad thing. But what I do as a landlord is I just get rent insurance on this anyway. So it's not something I'm super worried about, but it is something you need to look at and make sure you plan for. Number 2 is the conversion of ASTs into a periodic tenancy. I don't like the look of this because basically at the moment, the minimum tenancy anybody can take a property off you for is 6 months. What the new plans is planning to do is say it's a periodic. You can't kick a tenant out at all, changing that. So you cannot give a tenant notice. But ultimately, what a tenant now can do is use your property as a short-term accommodation because they only have to give you 2 months notice from the start. So the removal of no fault eviction means you can never evict them unless you try and take the property back or you've got a major reason for doing so. But they can move out after 2 months being in this property. So somebody can just move in, move out, move in, move out, which will put a massive impact on the turnaround because it costs money to find a new tenant, to clean the property after they've moved out. Even if they clean it, it usually needs a little bit of work to it. So that's not a really great law, and I think they need to revise that. Number 3 is banning of rent advances. So basically you can give a landlord 6 months up front or a year up front. So they're no longer allowing any landlords to take more than a small amount up front at the start of a tenancy. I can't see this affecting the market too much because in my experience, most people want to pay a large amount up front were usually criminals trying to rent your property for cannabis farms or prostitution and stuff like that because they didn't have the papers to pass. There is some genuine circumstances where people's salaries don't meet the required amount to make the coverage. That's why they'll pay a lump up front. But often then people's salaries are lower, get that lump up front from a family member. And I think the workaround for that would be get that family member to be a guarantor and then just top that up every month for them anyway. So yeah, I don't see that being a major problem that you can't work around. Changes to Section 8 eviction. So this leads on from what I was saying with the first one. Section 8 is when you have to take somebody to court. Section 21 is when it's a no fault eviction. A lot of landlords, even if the tenant is in fault, will take you through a Section 1 because you just get possession back of the property without having to go through a court process. You just apply for it. Where if the tenant's in arrears, you have to apply for it, the tenant can test it, you have to go backwards and forwards, it takes a long while. So they're saying they're going to overhaul this because they're getting rid of Section 21. If they overhaul it how they said they was going to, as I said in the first change of getting rid of Section 21, I think it's a positive thing. I don't believe they can change this as quick as they hope to, but only time will tell on that. Number 5, protection around increasing rents. So what they're going to do is stop people from massively jumping up rents. Over the last few years, rents have dramatically rose up because of this bill, because of all the tax changes. A lot of landlords are exiting the market and putting a big pressure on the rental supply. And when there's an undersupply of anything, general economics shows prices go up. So what they're going to do is cap landlords from putting that up unfairly. and allow tenants to appeal against that, which is number 6. Tenants are going to be able to take you to a tribunal if you put it up too much. So with 5 and 6, 5, I don't think it's a major thing. You're allowed to increase it to market rates, basically. So as long as you keep an eye on it incrementally, I don't see a major thing. Tenants can contest against it, but only if you go wildly above that. But the reality is, if you go wildly above what something can rent, nobody's going to rent it anyway. So I've never seen a landlord that really tries to put the rent up above what the market rate is anyway. So yeah, not a major problem with that one for me. Number 7 is a ban on bidding wars with rent. So this happens rarely. I've had this happen once. As I said, we've managed over 200 tenants in the lettings company. I've got over 50 tenants myself personally. I've been in the game since 2009, and I've had one property where we've had a bidding war where we put it up for 625. Had 2 people interested in it, and one of them offered 675 for it. It's happened once. So does it go on more? Maybe it does around the country, but I think as a landlord, if you set a price that you know the numbers work on, then just set that from day one and make sure that's fair. And I don't think it's a major problem. Of course, it's handy if somebody wants to offer you more money for something, but I don't think it's major going to disrupt things. Number 8 is a right for tenants to request pets. So I've always looked at a policy, as long as before we used to ask for an extra deposit, but you can't ask for that anymore. But now what we ask for is a pet insurance for the property if the owner's pet wrecks the property, which does happen. Dogs and cats, especially if they're young dogs, pee in the house, scratch skirting balls, bite stuff. So damage can happen from pets, which is fine as long as you're covered. I don't mind families having pets in there. My view on this is the more they make it a home, the longer they will stay there. The longer tenants stay there as paying tenants, the less turnover you got and the more profitable the property becomes. So for me, I don't see it's a major problem as long as the tenant's willing to pay the insurance for the pet insurance. Number 9 is an ombudsman for the private rented sector. So basically they're going to put all the landlords onto a big list so they can be kept more of an eye on. I don't think that's a bad thing, but the thing with the selective licensing and this, they're doing a pretty much same job. So I feel it's really, really terrible that you've got selective licensing where you're charging landlords £800, £1,000 for this licensing, which does the same job as this thing here. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we do need to keep an eye on rogue landlords, but it's one of them changes all the same. And number 10, with this ombudsman thing, it's going to feed into this landlord register. So this is what I've alluded to with the ombudsman. It's being there, the register is going to be alongside it, and this is the idea to keep an eye out, so people can just go on and identify rogue ones. I believe there should be a rogue tenant register that goes alongside that also, because obviously this reform, they first of all pitched it to make changes for landlords and tenants to improve the sector. So I think they should have a rogue tenant one, but what we've got at the moment. Number 11 is a decent home standard for tenants. I think this is this is a good thing. Yeah, that's a standard, and I don't think that is a bad law whatsoever, because every landlord should keep their property in a decent standard for their tenants. But also there should be a thing for tenants keeping them in a decent standard. Often my properties that suffer dramatic mold and bad living standards is down to the way the tenant lives, not down to the way that I've delivered that property to the tenant. So it's going to be difficult policing that correctly, but yeah, of course it should be kept up to standard. AWAAB, I'm a bit dyslexic, I'm not sure how you say it, but this is the law to remedy any hazards in the private rented sector. So again, another standard one there. Number 12, no discriminatory practices. So basically you can't say I'm not allowing kids, I'm not allowing anybody on benefits. But the thing is, a lot of people used to say no benefit tenants, and the reason behind that is because not a lot of people don't like benefit tenants. It's just because how the councils treat you. If a benefits tenant is in a property, they pay them directly, so they spend your money, you've got to then apply to the council to try and get your direct payments. And you then often have to ask permission from the tenant to give you permission to speak to the council, which are not going to give permission if they're in arrears. It's this whole mixed up system. So if councils work with tenants, I don't believe most councils will be bothered about that, but they just don't want them tenants because of the way they're treated from the councils. Also, when a tenant's in arrears, when they get paid directly from the council will tell them as well is stay in the home until the bailiffs come. So there's loads of things that a lot of landlords are fed up with working with council tenants. I love council tenants, but I am fed up with the way the council treat us in between that. And they leave the council tenants, which some are vulnerable, in vulnerable positions, like give money to a vulnerable person, often they might spend it, and I just don't think that's fair on them. You're setting them up for failure, and this is the reason a lot of people don't want that, and they've usually put it on adverts, but you no longer can discriminate against it. The truth is, in every area in the UK, whatever the benefits rate is, it's usually £200, £300 to £500 lower the market rate rent is. If you put it above what their affordability is, like, you can't let them in if they can't meet the affordability. So I don't think that's a major thing anyway. So this leaves us with the big question: is it really worth being a landlord in 2024? 1995. Well, I didn't want to make this video too long, so I created another video. Watch this next video now to see if it's worth it.